Välkomna till Max Tänt och med mig Max Villman. Och idag har jag den stora äran att presentera Joe Mcdonald som är en frivillig nere i Ukraina. Joe, welcome to the channel.
Good evening, Max. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great, and it's great to have you here. I know you have a lot of work, and we will switch to English now. And just a brief introduction from you. I found your interview on another YouTube channel, and I'll put a link, obviously, to your channel in the description below. But Joe Mcdonald, volunteer from the UK, down in Ukraine, currently in Kherson with the 196 Battalion, Marine, and also drone pilot, sapper, a man of many talents, I would say. So much welcome, Joe, and glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So what would you like to talk about?
Yeah, we will talk about everything as long as we can keep you here. Obviously, you're on the front lines, you're doing the work, and you have just been coming back from a long day of sapper work. So just briefly tell us a little bit about yourself, how you ended up down in Kherson on the front lines, fighting for the Ukrainian armed forces in Kherson.
Well, I first came to Ukraine March 10th of 22, and I was with 1st Battalion of the International Legion, back in the days where there was only one battalion. And my third day at Ukraine was the big cruise missile attack at the Yaraviv polygon. And I was one of the 300 or so guys who was either brave or stupid enough to stay. After that, a lot of people went home.
Yeah,
and then I spent
so for the listeners, Joe. So they basically, the Russians tried to target the place where all the international volunteers were gathering to train.
I've heard it said. I've tried to Google check this, but I think it was one of the biggest cruise missile attacks ever. There was 36 cruise missiles fired at a relatively small area. Yaraviv is a big base, but they were trying to target the internationals, and also Yaraviv was one of Ukraine's more high-tech bases, and that was the third day, my third day in Ukraine, and at that point, we'd all got the rearing to go. The moment we crossed the border, there's this tremendous excitement, and then we fell into very normal, very boring military induction stuff. Stand on parade, be told you'll be issued some kit at some point, go and wait around. The commander says something, no one you're at the back, you don't really know what's been said, and then suddenly the entire base exploded around us. There's a good video of it. If you just type into YouTube Yaraviv missile attack, there's a pretty good video of someone panting in the dark, and then the entire sky going like an African sunrise when one of the missiles hit. And I was in the grass, not too far from the guy filming that at the time. And then
you decided to stay. You decided not to go back.
I'd made a commitment, and I think the fact that I hadn't been to Iraq and Afghanistan had made me perhaps more willing to accept things as they were. I knew, I wasn't expecting it to. I think a lot of guys came and they were expecting it to be like the videos from Kyiv in the very early days of the war, where there was Russians being told to advance into stupid situations and the defenders had it all their own way. High kills, low deaths, a bit like a computer game. And a lot of the guys, are used to fighting people from the Middle East in sandals with little to no training or equipment, and then suddenly realize that, in fact, you're probably going to die from an airstrike or artillery before you ever see a Russian. And that's the welcome to peer-on-peer war. Here we go. So there were other guys. There were lots of guys with military experience who stayed. There were guys with no military experience who stayed. Some of the best soldiers I've met have been guys who've come into this war with zero military experience because they've just accepted reality as it is and gotten on with the job, applied themselves and learned. But after that, we got moved to some other base in Ukraine. got kind of starved for 6 weeks by an awful commander who we rebelled against.
For a mutiny.
Yeah, hey Bogdan, none of us have forgotten about you, you bastard. Then we got moved to, eventually we were moved to Kharkiv, spent some time hiding out in the industrial bits of the city there, and eventually were deployed to along the Donetsk River. And that's where I spent most of my war. And it was, I mean, we still got shot at and shelled by, you know, mortars and armored cars and tanks and artillery and helicopters. But it was a relatively speaking, a fairly quiet bit of the front. And then eventually, around the time that the sort of push for Kherson was beginning to happen in late August, September of 22, suddenly, without any warning, we were told to pack our things and we were sent into the Kharkiv counteroffensive. And that was, I played a pretty minor role in that. Me and a bunch of guys were detailed to take an automatic grenade launcher and protect this 4-battery 122 artillery section, like tracked artillery that go very, very fast. Like, you know, you hear about armored vehicles being able to do 60 kilometers an hour, but unless you've ever been on the top of one, you know how like speed's relative. Like if you're in a go-kart, it's a lot faster. Absolutely. 60 kilometers an hour on top of a tracked vehicle going through the forest is fast, really fast. For sure. But the Russians were too ungracious to attack us when we had the automatic grenade launcher. It was pretty disappointing. But, you know, I participated in the biggest battle since World War II, which was, however this might sound to people who are pacifists, was an absolutely exhilarating experience. There's no way to pay, no matter how rich you are, for that experience, you know, and it will only, actions like that, again, hadn't happened in 80 years or so, possibly will never happen again. And I was there, you know, got strafed by a fighter plane. That was a new experience. I have to admit, he was a good pilot. They fired 2 missiles at him and he span and pirouetted his way out of there. But then after the Kharkiv counteroffensive, I decided that it was time for a break for various reasons, a lot of them to do with personal exhaustion and a lot of them to do with how the Legion was run at the time. And I went back to England, and then I did some work with a war crimes investigation into Wagner for a bit, acted as a sort of consultant for them. I'm not really sure why they hired me, but apparently I gave value. And then we ended up, I came back to you. I started writing a book about my experience. That's pretty much like I've gone past the first year, and it's some of it's in this year now. But the thing is, while I was in Morocco writing this book and trying to forget about it all, the internet still exists, and I hadn't deleted all my Signal contacts. So as I'm sipping a cocktail on the beach, trying to chat up some girl, I'm getting text messages saying Frenchie's died, or one of the Colombian guys, Leon's died. And the war doesn't go away. The war's still there. So I decided to come back, and the interview.
That was out of sorry to interrupt, but that was out of loyalty for your comrades. Is that right? Or
more about the bigger thing of the war itself. Like I'd gone to the war initially because I did a little bit of military training in the British Army, which I never finished. You know, I was never a serving British soldier, you know. But England, one of the reasons I left my training is because I'd seen people coming back from Afghanistan missing their arms and legs. And I'm like, well, it's not really making England any safer, is it? Yeah. And this is our fourth war in Afghanistan now. It hasn't worked out the last 3 times. So, I decided to leave because England has never provided me in my lifetime with what I'd call a morally right conflict. And Ukraine, for all its faults, is just a young country struggling for independence and to break free of tyranny, oligarchy, and Putin's a dictator. Yeah. And if he wins, then the power balance in Europe is going to change dramatically in a way we will not like. Putin's a dictator. I'm British. We're meant to fight dictators, So that's why I went. But when I went back, I found that a lot of guys from the Legion have contacted me and said that they thought the interviews I did on Lindy Beige were great, and I just told the truth. But it upset a lot of people. Maybe I was a bit too truthful. I didn't make us look brilliant. I talked about the problems we had. If you don't talk about problems, they never get fixed, and you're complicit with the people who caused the problem, in my opinion. But that sort of blacklisted me from the Legion. I was offered a place in logistics, but I didn't fancy that. Logistics is very important. I just didn't like the guys who were working there. And I decided that there's lots of foreign units in Ukraine, but I'd say for every 10 foreign volunteers who've come to Ukraine, only 2 are actually worth having here. The rest of them are just drama and hassle, Goldilocks soldiers. The mission's too boring. The mission's not dangerous enough. I want this. I want that. I only want to do recon missions. I don't want to do normal OPs. And it's just a lot of complaining and noise that you have to listen to. So I decided to join a Ukrainian unit with a few other guys, and I'm glad I did. Started off doing as a reconnaissance unit. So we're doing a lot of amphibious missions out to the islands in the Dnipro. The first military thing I ever did in my life was being a Marine cadet when I was like 14. And I'd always fancied the idea of amphibious missions and getting on a speedboat and racing across the Dnipro and getting off and occupying a position. Very exciting. But then there were very few English speakers there, and communication is vitally important in every task you do that involves other people. So I found my way into the drones, and drones is where I've been ever since. And drones and sapper work go hand in hand. And I'm a qualified Mavic pilot. I've also qualified in a fixed wing drone, but we don't really use them very much at all. But mostly these days, I tried to learn FPV, but there's just too much communication involved for the long range missions we're doing. And I don't speak Ukrainian. I've struggled with learning Ukrainian a lot. So mostly I'm a sapper these days, and I love my job. It's different every day. And the infantry do very, very brave and totally necessary work, but 99% of your time is spent looking across a field at a tree line, seeing nothing, And with sapper work and drone work, well, you get to make the things that we drop from the drones, and then you get to see what the drones have done with them. And, if you're flying the drones yourself, you get to see the enemy, and you get to direct artillery, and you get to drop bombs on them. And it's very engaging. There's seldom a boring day. And that appeals to me a great deal. And also you're effective. Our team has, I need to be a little careful about details, but our team and the people we work with and the combined operations has accounted for more than 500, slightly less than 1,000 enemy combatants taken out of the picture, over 100 vehicles. We've made an impact. We've made a difference. Yeah. And even if I quit the war now, I've got enough skulls for a skull throne at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean that's the harsh reality of war, and also for all the listeners and viewers, when you're fighting in a peer-to-peer conflict, basically two opposing forces who are sort of equal when it comes to technology and all that. it's artillery and now also, of course, drones that do the majority of the killing and the wounding. It's
Absolutely.
not people shooting at other people with assault rifles. It's artillery.
About 1 or 2% of the casualties in this war are caused by rifles. Maybe there's a bit more with machine guns, but if actual bullets, sniper rifles, machine guns, if they counted for a total 5% of this war's casualties, I'd be surprised. It's probably more like 3.5%. Hardly anyone gets shot. It's all artillery and rockets and bombs from planes and drones. So yeah, but and I before the war, I was sort of working in construction and helping do music festivals. I'm a pretty liberal, pretty happy-go-lucky hippie kind of guy, really. But you soon lose once something's tried to kill you 20 or 30 times, and you've nearly died 20 or 30 times, and you've seen those who weren't so lucky. The simple fact of the matter is we're here to destroy the enemy. Yeah. And the only way this war's going to end is to destroy the enemy as efficiently as possible. Yeah. So, yeah, I hope after this war's over that I never have to kill or even fight anyone ever again. I imagine it's going to spoil hunting for me. I've always quite liked hunting for meat, not for trophies. Only wankers hunt for trophies. But yeah, I happen to be. I think I'm one of these guys who'd make a terrible peacetime soldier, but I'm good at war.
Yeah,
and follow your talent.
Yeah, and there's so many things I want to get into, Joe. But first, just to start off, what would you say about the enemy? So, what would you say about the Russians? Because there's a lot of there's the picture of their total imbeciles. They're very, very bad at their job, and there's also some instances where they're very good at their job. So what would you say? Obviously, you're fighting on one part of the front right now, but you've seen them in Kharkiv as well. So what would you say about the enemy?
50-50. There's a saying in Ukraine that applies to most situations, and it's 50-50.
50-50.
And some of the aspects of how the Russians fight, like they're very good, even before drones were a factor. They're very good at getting mortar fire directed in the right place quickly. Very good.
Yeah,
and
that's their doctrine.
We have less ammunition than them, but I know for a fact we have ammunition, and sometimes we seem to be really slow off the mark getting our mortars working. I'd say things have improved since I first got here, but when we were in the Legion, it was like, I remember some Americans, like they got this urge to go, well, we need air support. It's like, there is no air support, mate, but like, let's radio the boss and see about mortars. And then there's just this too many links in the chain of command. And by the time they actually start, and the fact that a lot of the guys didn't realize that the Ukrainians now mostly, as far as I know, the army now uses UTM coordinates. But before, some were using UTM and some are using SK or CK2000, which is the old Soviet system. So there's guys giving coordinates for mortar fire and not realizing that the mortarmen are on a different coordinate system. So there's some fucking comedy of errors stuff going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Russians can drop shells on our heads quickly and accurately. When it comes to their infantry, some of them seem very professional. Can
you say about like units? Is it like because there's a lot of talk about Marine infantry and VDVs, or the air assault forces or airborne forces?
Yeah, I've been up against at various times. I mean, not in any like close in trench assaults, but I've been opposed by Russian naval infantry, the Marines. I've been opposed by the VDV. I've been opposed by Wagner. I mean, if you look on the deep state map or the Google war map, you can see what units are across from me in Kherson. Bar's Kherson is sort of like a territorial defense unit made up of pro-Russians, either from the Kherson or Luhansk region. they seem pretty shit.
Yeah.
They seem pretty crap. But, you know, you need second line infantry and reserve infantry. Not everyone needs to be Spetsnaz, you know?
Yeah.
But the VDV and the naval infantry, yeah, they know the job. They know the job. They're not stupid. They, at the end of the day, the competent amphibious warfare troops, which is what we deal with down here. Their artillery is, I wouldn't say it's, you'd be amazed at how many shells they have to waste. Like there's sections of the islands across from it that are just swamp. Nothing can even walk there. Nothing has ever walked there. It's a fucking, it's a proper fucking swamp. Not like, oh, my ankles are wet. Like I'm up to my waist, up to my chest kind of swamp. And there's thousands upon thousands of shell holes in this swamp. Thousands. So it just seems they've got no end of artillery to, I think our shortage of artillery has been very, very good for training our guys. We can't afford to miss, you know? So even we don't have any NATO mortars in our area that I know of. I know the ones I've seen that our guys operate are old Soviet tubes, but fuck, our guys are accurate with them. Whereas it's probably sod's law that I'll end up getting killed by a mortar, but I'm really casual about incoming mortar fire now. It's like, boop, oh right, yeah, got time to light a cigarette really, and just casually stroll around a corner. You can hear it coming. There's next to no chance it's coming down on top of your head. Just sort of half jog a little bit to the nearest bit of concrete. Yeah, you know. They do have. There's a T90 in our area.
What's a T90?
It's a kind of a T90 is the most modern form of actually in use Russian battle tank. They've got the T-14 or Martyr, but that's like a unicorn. You know, doesn't really exist. But there's a T90 in our area, and I call him Russian Whitman. And Whitman was a famous Nazi tank ace that the British killed, and the bastard's good. We respect him. He'll pull up to a position, often very stealthily, without us detecting him with drones. So he seems to have thermal shielding and stuff on his tank. Be able to hit a house using his tank in artillery mode at like 12 kilometers.
Wow. And
then pull off again. Like, he must have been an artilleryman in his day, or he's really studied his trade, because the bastard's good.
That's one thing we just don't understand in Sweden, at least. Indirect fire with tanks, we just don't understand it. But like, obviously, there's instances where people actually can use it. Apparently, you know, it's down to it'll wear out the barrel quicker for some reason, possibly just because you're using the gun more. But if you have a sophisticated arms factory and you simply heat treat the barrel differently, you know, you could alter that. And a lot of weapons get used in indirect fire mode here, like the 57 millimeter anti-aircraft gun. That's really good for smashing semi-fortified positions. You know, if you've got like a nice concrete walled house with walls about that thick, stick 4 rounds of 57 millimeter into it, and that'll do about 7 or 8 kilometers in an indirect fire mode. Whereas in direct fire, it's like 4. Tanks are like 3.5, 4 in direct fire mode, but you can double or a bit more than that. And with some practice, you know, it's very effective, especially when you're dealing with enemies that have occupied a dwelling of some sort, you know, then it really comes into its own. You see 30 millimeter and 20 millimeter auto cannons being used in an indirect fire mode here to great effect. You know, whether it's killing or suppression, it's effective. Or denial of area. And obviously you have the drones to see where it lands, so you can also adjust the fire much more effectively than you could maybe just a couple of years ago, basically.
I think that's something that I was speaking to a Finnish guy who was visiting Kyiv as part of the charity called Zero Line the other day. He was ex-Finnish military. I won't say what part, but he was talking to me. I was talking to him about what drones have replaced, and on-foot reconnaissance is still important, but in a way, it's mostly just for checking where the actual minefield is.
Mm-hmm.
Reconnaissance has been has totally been replaced by drones. Otherwise, it's on-foot reconnaissance. If you were in some incredibly mountainous, high windy, densely forested area, then on-foot reconnaissance would still play a role. But otherwise, drones have replaced it. Drones have also replaced forward observing. You know, no matter how skilled a forward observer you are, your binoculars can only see as far as the first bush, and drones can fly over them. Yeah. And, you know, where we are in Kherson, we have elevated ground on our side, big fat plain on the other, and we're in a city. So, yes, there are tall buildings. So it should be a forward observer's dream. And I have professional Finnish forward observer binoculars with a built-in compass. I have a high-end spotting scope. Next to fucking useless. Next to fucking useless. If something's hidden behind a bush or some trees, always the drone is going to give you better, faster, more accurate target acquisition to direct mortar and artillery fire or other drones.
Yeah, and I want to get into that, because obviously I don't want you to tell us any, you know, that's too sensitive when it comes to information. But what can you say, like, in general, when it comes to reconnaissance using drones? Obviously, now you're in sort of a static position. You're on one side of the river. The Russians are on the other side of the river, like, generally speaking. How far can you fly without risking, you know, electronic warfare taking your drone out? Like, in general, you don't have to give us any specifics here, but like,
well, I'd just like to point out before you get the peacetime soldier or armchair general crowd saying I'm violating OPSEC, that it's well known that the drones we use are DJIs or Aurtels. They're both commercially available drones. The specifications and ability are listed on the website. Yeah. FPVs are a hobbyist drone, so how far they can fly and what they can do is also Googleable. Okay, yeah. So there's nothing. We do use some drones of other sorts, but I won't talk about them. So yeah. How far can they? I mean, say 45 minutes, maybe a little bit long, like maximum an hour, and more realistically 45 minutes, because you always want to leave about 25% on the battery in case of emergency or whatever, and to not run them out so quick. But we can go out to comfortably 5, really pushing it 10K, you know,
but without getting electronic warfare.
How good your antenna? Yeah. Is there lots of sand in the air that day? Is the atmospheric pressure creating weird little electrical fields? Where are the jammers? Have they noticed that jammers don't run 24/7? I mean, they can, but in its own way, that gives you away. If there's this spot that's just constantly being jammed, it's like, yeah, we should probably ask brigade artillery to shell the crap out of that place, because they've got something important there, you know? Yeah. So generally, there's someone listening out for a drone, and as soon as you hear it, bang the jammer on, and hopefully that will be effective. You know, if all things going well, we could fly we could use our bigger observational drones that I won't talk about, and our bigger FPVs to go out to 25 kilometers.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, we've done a few missions like that to great success, but there's so many factors that can get in the way of that happening.
Yeah. It's more of a planning. You need to plan it carefully with meteorology and everything, right? Or many factors. And your signal is like, Kherson's a very sandy area. If there's a load of sand in the air, that means there's a load of silicone in the air, and that really fucks up signals and stuff like that. So yeah, but comfortably on a normal day, anything within the 10 kilometer range has got to worry. Yeah. After 10 kilometers,
stuff can become a little bit more relaxed. But you've still got other kinds of drones that are in use, just not by my team. Like, you know, the Russians have Orlans. We have similar things, you know.
You don't have to comment, but I've heard and seen instances where you have basically drones that just amplify the signal, so you basically can go and then further along because you have direct, you know exactly where the drone is, so you can just amplify the signals. We call it radiolänk in Swedish, where you just, if you know where to send the signal, you don't need that high an output. It's very difficult to obviously, I don't want you to comment on that, but just obviously that's the way it goes. What about snow? Is snow also a problem?
It's an absolute bugger to land drones in snow because they don't like it. They freak out. The onboard software does not like landing in snow, so we normally have to sort of scrape a little patch away. We probably only had about 4 or 5 weeks of snow being on the ground in Kherson last year. I mean, it was cold for a lot longer, but this far south, we still get a really sharp European grade winter, but it's just shorter than it would be up in Kharkiv or something like that. But yeah, it also, the cold really affects the battery life.
For sure.
So that limits you. I mean, you can do little tricks like keeping the batteries in an insulated box with a hot water bottle. We were doing that last winter, putting hand warmers and taping them onto the batteries. We were doing that last year. But yeah, you know, hand warmers cost a couple of euros each time, and you can go through a lot in a busy day, and the army doesn't provide for it. Well, we do get some off the army and stuff, but suddenly it's like my volunteer money. It's like, fucking hell, I've spent $500 on hand warmers in the last month.
Yeah, and obviously we want people to donate to Big Mac Battle Blog. Obviously, the money's going to a good cause. So, and what about snow in the snow and rain in the air when it comes to visibility, when it comes to how it's affected, how far you can go with signals?
Yeah, it's bad weather. Ultimately, if there's too much moisture, too much rain, and too high winds, we can't fly. And and that means the Russians can't fly either. One of the things about drones is there's not enough guys. There's a very steep learning curve with it, and it's a lot of hours are taken to create a good drone pilot. So we work, like, the infantry tend to do 3, 5, 10-day shifts on position, and then they'll have an equal or greater amount of rest, recovery, retrain time afterwards, you know. Whereas with drones, I work like 27, 28 days a month. And yeah, if you suddenly get like a 3 or 4 day patch of really foul weather, it's like, let's have a nice meal, maybe drink a couple of beers, sleep, finally get round to tidying your room and washing all your kit properly. You know, like, bad weather is a drone pilot's best friend, basically. It means there's a couple of days off. And these days, only a fool would conduct some kind of infantry or mechanized push without the drones being able to fly. Like, it's probably special forces' best friend. If you wanted to go across the river and try and cut some throats or lay a bomb or whatever, bad weather would be special forces' best friend. But, you know, for anything larger than a small man mission, there would be no drones, and you need drones to tell you what the enemy are doing, you know. So yeah, there's always a double edge to everything in warfare. There's always a compromise.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, when you do that long on the front lines in service, obviously, you're gonna wear out. Like, eventually, like, it's gonna come creeping up on you. For sure.
One of the good things about the Ukrainian military is like a lot of like units that get sent to very, very intense places might do it. There has been some units because of the necessity of war that have been there for a long time. But say like the average unit that gets rotated into somewhere like Bakhmut or Advika or somewhere like that, they'll do 3 to 6 months and then they'll come back and be in a rest area and consolidate, replace casualties, retrain for 3 months or so.
Yeah.
My unit, we're on probably one of the nicest bits of the front, but it's still the front,
Yeah, for sure.
And
everything is relative.
There's this. We're in a city, and still 20% or so of the businesses in Kherson still function. Wow. So I can go to a supermarket, I can go to a hardware store. I have electricity. I live in it's a grotty, horrible, cockroach-infested Soviet apartment. It doesn't matter how many traps I put down. The place has got cockroaches. I've tried, but it's an apartment. It's not a bombed-out house that you go to rest in a hole in the woods. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we're in the Legion in the first year. Like an old abandoned Soviet cottage that will give you a lung infection or a trench. That was my conditions in the first year. So as things go, it's pretty sweet. But our guys have been deployed here since before they retook Kherson. We've been 2.5 years in the line.
That's madness. That's total
madness. But it's welcome to peer-on-peer war. It's necessary. But as I said, we do. There are times when Kherson. There are bits of Kherson, and there are times when it looks and feels like Stalingrad. And then the shelling will stop, and the babushkas will come out, and they'll be selling the watermelon at the outside on the street, and kids are playing in the park, and it's bloody surreal how people have normalized it here. There's a group of children who play not too far from where I live, and when I walk the dog, I go past them quite often. And they are more tuned into listening for artillery fire and avoiding it than every soldier in NATO. That's a fact. That's a fact, But there they are living.
It's a sad fact.
How old are you, Max?
38.
Okay, I'm 41. So we grew up at the same time before smartphones. Yeah. They're living a childhood much like me and you might have done, catching bugs. Catching bugs and making dens out of carpet and stuff. Yeah. And then as I'm walking the dog, you'll hear the tank go and they'll all scutter inside, and I'll give myself a building in between me and where it might land. And then, they'll come back out 5 minutes later and just continue to play. And that's just how it is. I think at the first year, everyone was terrified of the air raid siren. No one gives a fuck about the air raid siren in Kherson now. No one cares. It's either going to hit you or it's not. Get on with life. You can't stop going the shops every time the siren comes. And even normal civilians here are tuned in to hear when the artillery is coming their way. It's not just the distant boom that says it's going right and left. It's coming their way. So people just continue. And it's the Ukrainians have a really indomitable spirit. It reminds me very much of how the British legend of the Blitz spirit. They're not going to be broken. Terror bombing has ceased. The Russians keep terror bombing, but the Ukrainians are not terrified anymore. It's just become a fact of life.
Yeah, keep calm and carry on. Stiff upper lip and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a picture right there. Total madness. Wow. Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit, also without going into OPSEC, of course, but what would what would a typical day be for you, or a typical week? Like what would you doing? Would you do recon, or would you do like flying out and dropping bombs? What would like a typical day be for you?
Well, if I was with the drone team, I'd say, we're either working a day shift or a night shift. Normally, again, one of the luxuries of being in a city, we don't go to a position for 4 or 5 days like a lot of drone teams do. We do 2 shifts a day. And say if we were on the let's say the day shift, we probably arrive there very early in the morning, at dawn. Always a good time for movement, always in the military, always has been, always will be. And then, we'd set up the various antennas, one for the Mavics, one for the FPVs. We'd start flying reconnaissance missions with the Mavics, checking on any, we'd have some kind of handover brief from the team we'd replaced. They'd tell us what had happened in the night. We'd start flying reconnaissance missions. Then, that depending on what's happening, that could be 2 or maybe even 1 an hour. If it's a quiet day, we might just be flying 1 patrol an hour. If it's a busy day, we're flying constant relay reconnaissance missions.
So you never take the censoring off the front, basically.
And then we might, if we say have detected some Russian, like if we've detected some Russians in a house, we'll then make or a bit of forest or whatever, we'll make a decision on what to do then. That could be dropping a small bomblet or incendiary from a Mavic. It could be launching an FPV mission, and they carry bigger munitions, anywhere from at the small end 1 to 1.5 kilograms, all the way up to like 5 kilos. And a 5 kilo bomb
that's a big bang.
That's a house remover.
Yeah.
Or we might ask the mortars or artillery to do some work. Through the course of that day, we might, I really like sometimes the Russians have worked out that we're in X building for sure. They've seen us with their drone. They've detected some technology we're using sensors that they have on, say, the Orlan. Or they've triangulated a radio signal. All of those things over the last year for sure have happened. But quite often, I'm pretty certain they just get an order, probably from some drunk officer, saying, attack the Ukrainians. And they just like point the guns west and give us 10 rounds and sort of hope for the best. So, normally through the course of the day, we'll get shelled in the general area like once, say 6 to a dozen rounds. If they've really sussed out where we are, it could get a bit more intense, but it's part of the course, and then that's pretty much it. And a working day is kind of daylight / length of day, length of night dependent. So it can be any, in the summer, day shifts a bitch.
Yeah.
Like in the summer, day shifts like a 16-hour shift.
Yeah.
Or
how
more.
How do you keep your senses where they should be, like your attention?
Well, there's like, there's say 3 to 4 guys, maybe 1 less, maybe 2 more on the average drone team. And, I especially in the winter, I one of the things I've always been very keen on is looking after my guys.
Yeah.
So, I own a jet boil. I own 2. I make sure that we always have tea and coffee.
Yeah.
I make sure that, we go to the shop before work and get a bunch of energy drinks.
Yeah.
The pilot, when he's not flying, should be lying on a bed or sitting in the comfiest chair we want and doing nothing.
Yeah.
While someone like me or the navigator or the driver / security guy or sapper listens out the window for boats or drones or looks on one of the monitors we have that has feed from other teams' drones on our side and sometimes the enemy drones, although I can't go any more into that. But sometimes we can see what the enemy are doing.
Yeah.
So, it's important to get rest.
For sure. Yeah.
And
you'll be fighting so long as well. Like often in the West now, when we do exercises, like couple of days, perhaps a week, perhaps 2 weeks at most. And like, obviously 2 weeks can be a long time, but most people can at least do too much work for a couple of days, and then you make the wrong conclusions. Like what you said, like if you don't have a task, especially if you're like a drone pilot, like lie down and just recuperate your mental energy for when it matters. Like don't be stupid and just
I'd say at this point for us as well with our unit, like I am lucky to have an excellent officer. Like I actually love my officer. He's a very brave, very competent man. But I've sort of, me and the drone pilot guys, like, you know, drone pilots and sappers, we don't get treated like normal infantry.
Yeah.
And if you've made your way into this world, and it's not a job you can be incompetent at. If you're incompetent, you're going to be out. You're going to be sent back to the infantry very quickly. So me and all the guys have reached a position where if we say to the boss, fucking tired, I need a day off, it's going to be like, of course, have to, because you work really hard, you know.
Yeah.
I did like a 14-hour day today.
Yeah.
You know, and tomorrow I might do that again, or I might do 6. But if at any point I'm just like, if my boss is like, I want you to do this, it's like, boss, I've been ripping apart cluster munitions all day. I'm absolutely knackered. Can I do that tomorrow morning? Can I just come in early an hour tomorrow morning and do that then? That's the job I have to focus on, and I can't do that right now. I'd be like, yeah, that's totally fine, Mac. So it's a lot more like working in a professional construction company or something, you know, of skilled tradesmen, where your skills and your work ethic are valued and respected, as opposed to just senseless military bullshit, which a lot of people, their perception of how a military should be is based on peacetime soldiering.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, due to the nature of peacetime, the military has to create an awful lot of total fucking bullshit to keep guys occupied. That's a fact, you know? That's a fact. Standing on parade doesn't build discipline. There's nothing about standing on parade or having someone shout at you that makes you good at actual war. Trust me, I know. I've seen lots of guys come over here who've done years and years in the military, and they fell to fucking pieces at the first artillery barrage. Like, fell to pieces. A lot of what the military teach in peacetime is just a way to keep people occupied. And it's just not relevant to the task at hand. Our task is to destroy the enemy. And as always, your first task as a soldier is to preserve your mental and physical well-being, so you're able to do the job. You can't learn if your mental well-being is suffering. You can't work if your physical well-being is suffering. So task number 1 is that, you know. Like, I don't eat army food. I come home and air fry a steak most days. You know?
Yeah, I mean that's the way you should make it as good as possible. And there's always a joke when it comes to the army in regards to the Navy and the Air Force. They always make fun of us because we have good food and good beds. And I mean, it's but it's I mean, I agree totally. If you don't have something productive to do, it's better to sleep or eat, basically.
Absolutely.
And tell me a little bit more about the sappering side. So why do you also take cluster munitions and take them apart? Like, what's that job all about? Like, is that the same job, or?
Essentially, drones drop bombs, and no military company has started making a drone-specific line of weapons. And even if they did, I doubt Ukraine would buy them because they're expensive. You know. So while the at brigade or regional command or even government level, there are workshops making drone munitions now. Well, there's nowhere near enough of them. And some of them are a bit shit, you know. Like, generally speaking, my bombs are better than the ones the government send us. So, and because the Russians are so fond at firing stuff just at everything, there's a lot of UXOs around. So it became, unexploded ordnance, basically. So once drones had moved past the stage, which you would have seen at the start of the war, where we were just dropping hand grenades, onto stuff, which was more for a morale than military of effectiveness, quite frankly. That sappers making munitions for the drones has become a thing. And I really, when I first came into this war, I was intending to either work with the medics or work with demining or engineering. That's what I saw, being nearly 40, having some knowledge in both of those fields. But then I ended up doing a light infantry role that sort of led into forward observing, and then realized that forward observing was pretty much defunct. So I started getting interested in drones. That's a big part of what I do. I mean, I do worry a bit about how the fact that, however you want to dress it up, I'm a bomb maker. How that's going to affect my future if I decide to go back to the UK. I'd like to say that we recycle enemy ammunition and turn it into loitering munitions. That's probably like the best sort of legalese to use to describe what I do.
You can always greenwash it and say you're a recyclist or
we recycle toxic litter that the Russians leave in Ukraine. But at the end of the day, it's cold hard necessity, and in every conflict there's always been some element of your guys ending up using bits of the enemy's weaponry, and this is just a modernized extension of that. But I have to say, I don't think I'm like, probably, even if I was 25 and really, really fit, and went to the gym 4 times a week and didn't smoke a pack of fags a day, I don't know if I've got like the right kind of mentality for being a hard charging trench clearer, but I am steady. I don't panic when I'm getting shelled, and I can take apart munitions and stuff without my heart rate going up at all, and be very focused on the fact. And we have a little like nursery rhyme with the sappers, and it's like, if it all goes wrong, then I won't know. I won't know. I won't know. If it all goes wrong, then I won't know, and it's someone else's problem. And that's the truth of it. But some guys turn to jelly when they encounter a minefield, or they don't want to be anywhere near explosives. Me, I'm cool with it. And I see my future as hopefully working in civilian humanitarian demining. Plenty of work for that in Ukraine. And there's also the contracts to do with keeping dealing with the shipping lanes in the Dnipro and Mykolaiv. That's something I'm interested in for the future. But it turns out I'm good at it. I came up with a little thing called the Flower of Unlife recently. Inside a Grad rocket, there is all these little tiny incendiary submunitions called 9N25s. And we found a load of them that they'd hit the swamp, so that the nose cone had detonated, but they hadn't all burnt up because they were in the mud. And then we had a bunch of good ones. So if you put one good one surrounded by 6 not so good ones that have been dried out a bit, and some gunpowder on the top, and then a packet of gunpowder underneath, and a bit of wire around the outside to hold it all together, you basically create a mini incendiary cluster munition. So when the gunpowder gets hot, they pop and go everywhere. And they're extremely good for burning enemy positions down. And there's something quite emotive about burning half a dozen houses down in a day. A little bit of Mongolian throat singing music going in the background and stuff. But it's war is awful. I got very emotional when I was in Kyiv. and I saw the little garden where all the flowers by the Maidan, where all the flags for the fallen are. Many of my friends are in there. I've got very emotional when I've been to Kherson Hospital and seen the latest crop of wounded old people and children from the Russian shelling into the city. I've got very emotional when friends of mine have died here in this conflict. But war's also a lot of fun sometimes. It's very engaging and exciting. You know, they're hunting us, we're hunting them.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's having a purpose is definitely quite fulfilling. So yeah, you know, I suppose you've got to take your happiness where you find it in this life at the end of the day.
Yeah, and obviously, like you have a good outlook on life, Joe, and that sort of comes through. But like you said, we shouldn't forget that at the same time that's one way of making things happen and dealing with all the madness that's going around you every
have
day.
To have a sense of humor, or you'd go mad in this. You know, there has to be some form of release from it all, or some way to compartmentalize it. You know.
Yeah. Do you have something that you could show us? I think you have something in the back there, don't you? Or is it all at the front? This looks like there's something behind you. That's a hunting rifle, or
it's a shotgun. This is a USSR produced copy of an English Purdy, and one of our recon guys captured it off a Russian position and then gave it to my boss as a thank you for something he'd done for him. And then, as I'm like the commander's assistant, you know, is one of my roles. I spend more time working with the commander than anyone else, really. I'm his anti-drone protection. So yeah, I have my lock, stock, and 2 smoking barrels.
Yeah.
Little bit of Vinnie Jones going on thing there. But yeah, it's a nice. I actually think this is a better anti-drone shotgun than having something that's very heavy and tactical and got rails on, because, well, it's for shooting things out the sky.
Yeah.
So it's very nimble, you know, and I can stick this on my back and take it on a mission with me without, I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried to carry 2 assault rifles and all the ammunition at the same time, but it's an absolute bloody nightmare.
Yeah, for sure.
But this is only about 1.75 kilos, and I can just chuck a handful of shells in my pocket and not really notice it, you know. It's just like carrying an extra bottle of water. And yeah, there's an awful lot of quail in the Kherson region as well. Quite a lot of them out near one of the places where we go shooting. So we definitely wouldn't do anything like that.
No, absolutely not, right?
Absolutely not. But if we did, this would be just right for it. And I've also got it's heavy. Got a 120 incendiary mortar, and the wonderful thing about these is they're exactly the right size for a bottle of Jameson's. So, you know, it's a good place to hide whiskey and money, because no one wants to go. I guess I've given away my secret now, but no one wants to go messing around with it. So yeah, and put that down on the floor now in case, because it was well balanced. And I've also got one of it might be hard to see the letterings. I had my own range of what have I done? If you can just about read it there, it says Big Mac XL. And these are my own developed range of 3D printed munitions. And this one will hold dead on 2 kilograms of PVV7, which is a kind of plastic explosive, and up to 2.5 kilograms of shrapnel, depending on how we want to pack it. And this is a house destroying grade bomb. Yeah. So I had them developed. So yeah, it's one of the interesting things about being a sapper is you when you're in the infantry, they'll give you some hand grenades and you'll come back for the mission and you'll hand them back in. And as a sapper, it's like, God, I've got a lot of dangerous stuff in my room, God, well, where's the anti-tank mine gone? Oh, I think I've put that away in a box. Yeah, I've got an anti-tank mine floating around in the room with me somewhere, just in case the wrong sort of people come and knocking,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting job. I have the best job in the world. I really enjoy my work. I hate to say it, as much as I want this all to be over, I wonder what I'm going to do afterwards.
Yeah. I guess there's not going to be so much that's like it, right?
No, but I guess I have a feeling I'll stay in Ukraine, and I think that if Russia was to fall tomorrow, unless they suddenly get a very, very liberal, pro-Western, wants to fix all the wrongs kind of politician, there's still going to be an ongoing security problem, and intelligence operations back and forth, and and there's also Wagner in Africa to deal with. So plenty of work still to be done.
Yeah, for sure. And we touched on so many things here, and I don't want to keep you so long. I want you to get some sleep, because obviously you're in a combat zone and you're obviously doing missions basically every day. So yeah, is there something else you would like to touch on, Joe, before we?
I'd be keen to know what you think about if and when Ukraine's going to get some Gripens, because I think we should have. I think the only reason we don't is that the Americans said, if we're giving you all this aid, you have to get F-16s. And right now we have 4 very expensive flying air defense systems.
Yeah.
And if we had the Gripens, which are much more versatile, much more easy to service, we'd probably have a functioning air force by now. And yeah, do you think that's going to happen? Do you have any good friends at Saab?
Yeah, I'm actually going to visit Saab next week, but I think there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes at the moment, and I think eventually they're definitely going to get some Gripens for sure.
Well, I hope it's a shorter eventually than a longer eventually.
I think
it'd be nice to have some air defense. It's air support's like a sort of a rumor, a myth here. I've seen some Ukrainian fighter planes go in on the Kharkiv counteroffensive. I had a friend who was at Avdiivka near the end, and he saw close air support go in then. But it's pretty much only when we're about to be overrun that happens, and like dramatically overrun, like a whole town lost. Then you might get some air support. So be nice to have 20 or 30 Gripens at probably like the cost of about 5 F-16s as well.
I definitely hope so. And obviously Ukraine needs more air defense in general, so you can free up the fighters to do the offensive stuff as well.
I wish that Ukraine, and again, I've heard it was from American pressure, but I really wish, like how we've used foreign volunteers here has been so bloody mismanaged. Like I know a Polish guy who'd flown F-16s in Afghanistan with the Americans, who was clearing trenches here. It's like, why didn't Ukraine allow all these foreign, like, hey, been trained to fly jets for your entire career, never flown a combat mission. Would you like to come to Ukraine and fly some combat missions? Or the air defense guys, like been in American air defense, highly trained soldier, never fired a fucking shot, even though you've been on deployment a few times because of American air superiority. Come to Ukraine, shoot Patriots for us. I mean, I wish stuff like that was more how it had panned out. But yeah, like if anyone in the Ukrainian government's listening, maybe letting the foreigners come and fly jets for you wouldn't be the worst idea.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I've heard rumors about that being okay as well, and I also think just to touch on that, I think there's a little bit of anxiousness from the Ukrainian side to not piss off the Western side that they're like stealing their pilots or anything. I think there's a little bit of that as well going on the side, but it's politics. Like you never know.
Yeah, politicians worry about like upsetting each other, and guys like me and my friends die in the trench while they argue about it.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for the interview,
Thank
Matt.
you so much. Yeah, tell us again where we can find you, Joe.
So yeah, my YouTube channel is called Big Max Battle Blog. If you just punch that into Google, I'm sure you'll be able to find it. There'll be a link into the description on this video. And yes, please do like and subscribe and leave a comment longer than 7 words and everything. And I have a PayPal link that's, unfortunately just an email. Don't email me, please. Don't email me, especially if it's questions about wanting to volunteer in Ukraine or some crazy idea for new drone technology that you have. Don't fucking email me. I'm not interested. Okay. But if you want to send me a tenner or $1,000, I will spend it on drones or drone related things that help destroy the enemy. That's what I do,
Yeah.
So
it looks like a good use of everybody who's watching and listening's money to send them to Joe, to Big Mac, and he will use it to remove some orcs. That sounds like a good
help bring peace to Ukraine by drone warfare.
Exactly. Well, that's a perfect way to end it, Joe. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you get a good night's sleep, and obviously, thank you so much for your service. You are risking your life every day for our benefit, for our freedom. So stay safe, and thank you so much. And I hope everything will go well going forward.
Thank you very much, Matt. Hope to meet you in the flesh one day. Have a good evening. Goodbye.
The beer's on me then. Cheers, Joe.
Goodbye. Bye.